Hello, Dr. Ellie Pearce, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Hello.
I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep, sure. So I'm a research fellow in the Division of Psychiatry at University College London, and I coordinate the Loneliness and Social Isolation in Mental Health Research Network.
Fantastic, brilliant. And that's great because that's what we're here to talk about today is loneliness.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, is loneliness a mental health problem? Is it classed as a mental health problem?
I think this is a really interesting question, and no, not officially. It's not classed as a mental health problem. So we do know that there is quite a lot of association between loneliness and mental health problems. So if you're lonely, you're more likely to develop things like depression, anxiety, psychosis, but also if you already have those experiences of, say, depression, you're more likely to become lonelier. So that there is this relationship between loneliness and mental ill health, but that's not the same as saying that loneliness is a mental health problem. And I think there's quite a lot of debate around this. And I think the thing with loneliness is that everyone or most people experience loneliness at some point in their lives. So often around transition, so having a new job, moving somewhere new, retiring, having a bereavement, all these are kind of natural life events. And it kind of makes sense to feel lonely when your social relationships change. And we think the issue is when people get stuck in loneliness. So you can think of loneliness a bit like hunger. It's a signal that there's something not quite right in your social world and you need to take action to get the relationships, the friendships, both in terms of quantity and quality that you really desire. So actually it's a very good thing. Loneliness, it's really unpleasant. It's a horrible feeling, but actually it does motivate you to want to seek more satisfying social relationships. So loneliness itself, I don't think is a problem. The problem is when it becomes chronic, and then that seems to be when you might start feeling more depressed, you might start feeling socially anxious, and then you might need to get more help with that. So I would say overall, no, loneliness isn't categorised as a mental health problem, but it's certainly very much associated with mental ill health, both as a kind of risk factor for developing mental ill health. But I think it also, if you're already experiencing mental ill health and you're lonely, it makes it even harder to recover from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. So what can someone do then if they're feeling lonely? What can somebody do? How can they manage that loneliness?
Yeah, so this is really tricky because I would say from the research, we actually don't have a very strong evidence base for what helps and for what helps different people and why different things might help. So some of the reviews that have been done suggest that psychological approaches might help, so something like cognitive behavioural therapy, but there really isn't the evidence base to really say this is what you need to do if you're feeling lonely. We have been doing an interview study recently with people who've experienced mental ill health. And one of the questions we asked was, what advice would you give someone who was feeling lonely? And they came up with some amazing suggestions and what would help them, which was brilliant to hear. And it really varied. I think kind of social contact came up quite a lot, but in different forms. So that might be going out for a walk on your own with the dog and you happen to have a chat with other dog walkers, or going to a cafe by yourself and you happen to strike up a conversation with a stranger. But it also could be going to a regular social group, doing an activity that you love with other people who also love that activity, or talking to someone who you really trust and you're really close to. So it's social contact, but the forms that help really seem to depend on the individual. It was also really interesting that our participant talked about loneliness, not just in terms with feeling a lack of connection with other people, but also things like a lack of connection with themselves. So quite a lot of the advice was about developing a more positive relationship with yourself, developing activities that really inspire you, that you really love, getting to know yourself through journaling, through things like mindfulness, but also connection to nature. So going out and spending time in nature, and that could be in solitude. But that helps some people deal with their loneliness. And I found that really interesting because we often think of loneliness as being about connection with other people, but in what these participants were saying, and I think, yeah, it's kind of come up in other research as well, that it is also about connection with yourself and with something like nature, something like spirituality. Those are some different ideas that our participants came up with. And some people did say that psychological therapy to work with their mental ill health helped as a kind of a first step towards them being able to engage with community activities, for example. So I think it really just depends on where you're at, kind of what's the first step, what do you need to do first to try and get out of this kind of prolonged loneliness that we can sometimes find ourselves stuck in. So those are some ideas, but as I say, there was a huge variety and it really does seem to depend on the individual.
There's some great suggestions there, and a lot of those suggestions would help people that actually have anxiety as well, not just, the mindfulness, the getting in touch with nature, etc., that kind of thing. So some really great suggestions there. But just one last thing though, what about the people that have been, stuck at home with, the pandemic that's been going on, etc., and they can't get out? We get a lot of people that actually can't get out due to agoraphobia, things like that. What would you suggest to them? What would you give? How would you encourage them to make contact with other people?
Yeah, so some of the participants did suggest kind of digital forms of communication. So social media and Zoom calls with friends and family did seem to help some people. I mean, often it was a matter of using digital support, like something like Meetup, to then meet in person. But other people did seem to be mainly doing things online, again, as you say, because they were unable to go out of the home for whatever reason. And I think also this emphasis on finding something that you really love to do, that really inspires you. So it could be art, could be, I don't know, reading novels, whatever you really enjoy, that actually it didn't need to be with other people necessarily. That actually for some people it really helped them feel connected to do what they love on their own. And I suppose you can find communities of other people who love that same thing online. That's one of the wonderful things about the internet. So maybe, yeah, that would help some people who have been isolated in their home. And I'd be interested to hear what people watching this video have found to help them, because as I say, I think it really varies what people find is the thing that helps them shift out of that loneliness and into feeling more connection.
Absolutely, yes. Well, definitely people will be able to comment below this video that's going to go out on our channel, and also they'll be able to email me as well, and which I'll pass on to you. So
fantastic.
that's
yes,
brilliant.
please.
So that's great. That's just something that's got me thinking there, that by boosting your own self-esteem, etc., can actually lead on to further steps that lead out of the, can I say, trap of loneliness? Because it's a trap, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I think it can feel like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for giving us this insight into the research that you've been doing, and also where people can go to start taking steps out of the trap of loneliness. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I hope it helps. Thanks,
I'm
Sarah.
sure it will. Thank you. Bye bye.